Right, so the ongoing refusal by Ahmed Al Sharaa, the new unelected president of Syria, and a guy who many in the country fear plans on staying that way, to deal meaningfully with Israel, still in his country, building roads, building outposts, planning on staying and never leaving. His determination to seek an alliance with Israel in defiance of everything they are doing is going down like a lead balloon, and it's finally burst, especially in the territory Israel are now claiming control over. Regional governments sick and tired of the total inaction of their new government to actually govern in their interests and not seemingly in the interest of a foreign invader the new regime is allowing to walk all over them. But with the latest move by Netanyahu in southern Syria now a direct threat to Al Shara's new administration, will he finally snap at Israel before his people finally snap with him? Right, so once more a story going pretty much completely ignored by Western media, to no surprise at all, is one that could actually have widespread implications for the entire Middle East, as Benjamin Netanyahu has now acted to stamp his authority on southern Syria in a manner that surely now, at last, cannot go ignored by the new Syrian regime of Ahmed Al Sharaa and his administration of Al-Qaeda cast-offs. But even if he does now act, it may be too late in the eyes of many of his subjects, who have been demanding for more than 2 months now that the incursion by Israel into Syria, following the fall of Assad last December, is not on. It's illegal. And given how many times Al Sharaa has told Israel to leave and they just continue to ignore him, when is he going to do something more to push back? Well, his window of opportunity to do so may be closing. And of course it all depends on whether he can muster the forces to do so as well. But Israel having destroyed much of the militia or militaria Assad left behind when he fled, almost like Israel was softening Syria up for what came next. And it's not like anybody questioned it, because Israel always gets a free pass, don't they? Well, before the fall of Assad, Israel already controlled Syrian sovereign territory, the Golan Heights, and had done so since 1967, the Six-Day War that saw them occupy the territories of Palestine and remain the occupiers of those lands ever since. But if we fast forward to today, in the here and now, post-Assad as we are now, and Israel's presence in Syria has expanded far beyond the Golan Heights. Satellite imagery has confirmed that 7 new Israeli military outposts now exist within newly seized Syrian territory, effectively creating a greater buffer zone in southern Syria, as shown here in this image taken from Israeli news outlet Haaretz, which shows them dotted along that newly conquered area in pink. This doesn't seem like a lot of land looking at it this way, but for one, that isn't the point, and for two, Israeli influence has pushed far further, as I'll come on to. But this isn't just about military strategy, it's also about controlling resources. The entire Yarmouk Basin, a critical water source for Syria and for Jordan, is now under Israeli control as a result of this, further crippling a nation still in no way, shape or form having recovered from over a decade of civil war. At this point, we better bring Ahmed Al Sharaa into the story, the leader of the new Syrian government that came to power after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Al Sharaa's rise was heavily supported by Israel when he headed the Al-Qaeda splinter group, the Al-Nusra Front, and who had the backing of Israel and others who saw him as preferable to Assad. But here's the irony. Al Sharaa's government, which owes its existence in part to Israeli backing, is now facing widespread criticism for its inability or unwillingness to stand up to Israel as they push further into Syrian territory and seize even more of it. The people of Syria, especially the Quneitra governorate within that new Israeli buffer zone, are demanding action. You can quite understand why, can't you? They're tired of seeing their land occupied, their resources stolen and their sovereignty violated. And they've told Al Sharaa this in no uncertain terms, as this excerpt from Lebanese outlet Al Mayadeen explains. Today, Saturday, the Preparatory Committee for the Syrian National Dialogue Conference held a dialogue session with the people of Quneitra Governorate of southern Syria within the framework of the national dialogue process. The participants in the dialogue raised several important issues, most notably the unity of Syrian territory and confronting the Israeli incursion into the buffer zone, in addition to demanding the liberation of the occupied Syrian Golan and the cancellation of the decision to annex it to the occupying entity. The necessity of appointing a governor to manage citizens' affairs and provide basic services in the government was emphasised. Participants called for achieving transitional justice, amnesty and tolerance, and the necessity of establishing a special committee for the affairs of the people of Quneitra and the Golan, in addition to a national army, reviewing educational curricula and achieving economic justice and transparency. According to the Syrian news agency Sana, the participants also stressed the guarantee of personal freedoms, the independence of the judiciary, and the establishment of a communication platform to exchange ideas and opinions on building a new Syria, with the need to expedite return of the displaced to their homes. It's a fair old swipe at Al Sharaa and what they fear he's bringing with him, his form of extremism. But if you also had Israel parked on your lawn and just were deciding to call the place home, having seen what had become of the Golan Heights and the West Bank and Gaza, well, you'd have issue with them hanging around as well, wouldn't you? The least you could expect is your government to do something about this, especially one that claims to want to win over your hearts and your minds so you vote for them in future. Or is Al Sharaa planning to become the very dictator many fear he will and rule as he decides and balls to the people, in which case, why did he bother to depose Assad if he just planned on becoming him? Is Al Sharaa more interested in maintaining his own power than protecting his own people? Well, what he does next matters, because a lot of eyes will be on him now, especially given what Israel has now just done. Aside from having taken over this buffer zone between the Golan Heights and the rest of Syria, you see, and aside from the control he exerts across a wider area of southern Syria now beyond that, Benjamin Netanyahu has now declared that no Syrian forces will be allowed south of Damascus. I'm sorry, what? Yes. Israel is basically annexing all of Syria south of the capital Damascus. In this image here, you can see the three provinces we're talking about in light blue at the bottom. Quneitra being that buffer zone, basically, that was shown in the previous map with those outposts on it, and with the much larger Dara and Suwaida provinces included this time, all of which contains the Yarmouk River Basin, which I aforementioned, all that water, more resources controlled by Israel. Israel placing an even bigger buffer zone between it and Al Sharaa's bit of Syria, and it also puts Israel on Jordan's northern border and in control of 40% of their water. Jordan, a country currently being coerced, of course, or attempting to be coerced, into accepting the people of Gaza under Donald Trump's ethnic cleansing plans, along with Egypt. So this is an incredibly threatening position for Israel to take versus both nations. This effectively creates one heck of a buffer zone controlled by Israel, and all with, surprise, surprise, Donald Trump's consent, his support having been published for this in the Jerusalem Post. Yes, the same Trump who suggests ethnic cleansing in Gaza is now backing Israel's expansionism into Syria. This isn't about security. Al Sharaa has bent himself in knots begging to be Israel's friend, but to no avail, because for Israel it's more about ideology and a land grab. The concept of Greater Israel is back and is becoming more and more of a reality, and Syria is on the list of lands to conquer. But southern Syria, in control of so much water, if left there, they can make life really hard for Syrians and Jordanians alike, with all the political pressure they can exert. Plus, they can set up their own military in those areas to push against either country. They're bottlenecked against Jordan currently on their border along the River Jordan by a handful of river crossings only and an impassable mountain range. Not from the north of the country, though. And it will put Israel in a position just a stone's throw from both the capitals of both countries, from Damascus and Amman. And certainly I'm not suggesting this is what's going to end up happening here. It is more me thinking out loud, but it does coincide with the plans for Greater Israel, and the position is a strong one if Israel chooses to deploy the IDF in these three Syrian provinces. It is now barring the Syrian government from moving its military into. In retaliation to this, there has been, of course, as you would imagine, condemnation and protests in these provinces. The Druze community who live in these areas, a religious minority, have announced intentions to join the Syrian army to defend their homes. And in Suwaida province particularly, there's been formed a Suwaida military council. So it seems with or without their new president and his government, these people are going to fight to defend themselves. And what an absolute sham that makes the new regime look. But what of Al Sharaa in all this? What has he had to say? Absolutely nothing, it seems. I can find no statement, no intent, no reporting on his response to Netanyahu annexing yet another massive chunk of his country. I wonder if he gets it yet that you can never be friends with a nation that is led by a genocidal maniac. I do hope he's thinking of something, though, because he cannot carry on the way he's gone. The impact on the Syrian people will be devastating. Families will be displaced. Resources will be stripped away. The hope for a stable post-Assad future is fading because it's what comes with Israeli occupation. And yet Al Sharaa's government seems to have gone AWOL. Seems to be more concerned with delaying political reforms than addressing these urgent issues. Al Sharaa stated that a new constitution for Syria, being drawn up with Turkey, won't be ready for at least 3 years, and elections therefore won't happen for 4 or 5 years. And this has raised those fears that Al Sharaa has no intention of relinquishing power, even if the people demand change. But here's Netanyahu taking his country away from him bit by bit anyway, and he's nowhere to be seen. This isn't just a Syrian issue, though, because just as with Gaza and now the West Bank and also Lebanon as well as Syria, it's become a global one. The expansion of Israeli territory, the exploitation of resources, the displacement of people who may too easily end up becoming the refugees of tomorrow in due course, are all part of a larger pattern of aggression that has gone unchecked for far too long, supported by too many bought and paid for politicians for far too long. Ahmed Al Sharaa needs the wake-up call most of all in this, though. By consistently refusing to take a strong stance against Israel, he's not just failing his people, he's now enabling their occupation. The Syrian people need a leader who, for one, is duly elected, but also one that will fight for their rights and prioritises that over batting his eyelashes to Israel. Sitting in silence looking sulky isn't going to cut it this time. Meanwhile, of course, whilst Netanyahu clearly thinks more war and more expansionism are how he's going to keep himself in power that bit longer, he might be thinking he needs to go that little bit further still. Therefore, the very suspicious explosions of 3 buses in Tel Aviv, injuring absolutely nobody, ever so conveniently, has had people asking a lot of questions about that, not without good reason, because the more you delve into that incident, the more holes there seems to be in the story, and the more and more it looks like it might have been Israel itself behind it all. But could it go all the way to the top? Is it a big fat false flag? Check out that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, and also help support the channel at the very same time, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.